All right, so this is Todd Atkins, and I'm back with Miguel Iterati, MMA Museum Project coming. And today we're going to do another episode of the MMA Conspiracy Hour, which I titled The Art of the Deal. Did the UFC cut a deal with Colby Covington? Is he going to drop charges on Jorge Masvidal? We're going to get into all that. So, Miguel, I wanted to let you kind of start with your opening thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's one of those situations that kind of blew up and went out of control. It was clearly, something that, I think the conspiracy here, what we think is that there is an orchestration that was going on there to make publicity for whatever, however they were going to do it. And it went wrong for him. Either, Colby didn't get the message or whatever, it didn't go right for him. Since then, it's been nothing but a nightmare. Covington's again. Covington's one of those guys who's worked his way up into those top earners. Top draws kind of guy. He was a big media star and stuff like that, and he's basically been on the shelf since all that happened. And now it's very abrupt that he comes back. All of a sudden, it does. What changed? Yeah, obviously behind the scenes, something's been worked out there. Either they're dropping charges or some type of settlement has been made, or who knows? Who knows how detailed these things can get, officially and unofficially? Is it something where, the last time we heard Covington's name, they were tossing his name around as a potential Hamzat opponent. Even while this was happening, Hamzat was the guy that he was commonly considered. Hamzat, mentioned that in his social media too, that hey, Covington, what about me? So he was originally, that's the last time we heard him. To go from Hamza to, a title fight, yeah, I think most people would take that, So and that may come with how inordinate an amount of a raise does he get? Is there a big bonus attached to that, which is kind of becomes payoff money type of money, type of money to forget the whole thing? Were any public funds spent investigating, looking into this? If everybody hired lawyers and they blew their own money, who cares, right? But I think they'd have to restitute something there into the public if that's the case. Just a stupid case, just stupid.
I want to ask you, let's go back to Colby weighing in. I mean, this kind of they dropped this on everybody like nobody knew. They did a good job keeping under wraps, which is something they used to struggle with a long time ago. Nobody seemed to get this out. What did you think about him showing up and weighing in and all that?
He didn't just show up and weigh in. You're right. It's been planned, and usually, with a plan like that, see, that's the thing is Colby has worked himself out of the immediate radar. So, nobody noticed. Hey, 2 weeks ago he started to cut weight, or 3 weeks ago, he kicked it up a notch. You don't get just offered a title fight and then just think, oh, everything stays the same, right? At some point, he flew himself to London, or got himself to London somehow and stuff like that. And no, so it took some orchestration to get him there without anybody noticing, A little luck too. The people that checked him in at the airlines didn't know him, and they didn't want to, man, I checked in Colby Covington today, on their Facebook. So, but he was planning it. So this settlement is probably a month old, or they figured out what they were going to do about a month ago. And I'm sure Colby, when lawyers get involved in these extensions and things, Colby's probably been on the shelf long enough that he's probably eager to get this situation out of the way.
Now, do you think how soon, if at all, do you think we'll find out if there was some sort of dropping of charges?
No, I mean, I think there were court records that were set and dates that were set that would have to be canceled or, not met or whatever. And at that point, it's part of the public record and something has to be, come out at some point, right? But, at the end of the day, I think Covington is the one that is making the most change here. because he seemed to be the one that felt, aggrieved really badly. I thought it was a personal a mistake on a guy with his career to come out and say, hey, you hit me in a restaurant, like, that's bad, because if the tables were reversed and somebody had said, Covington, why don't you go, pick on your next opponent at a restaurant and stuff, he'd probably have been all over that. So if that orchestration is what we suspect, and everybody's dirty, you know, money can be handed out, and things can be forgotten. At the end of the day, Colby was suing for money, you know, and you watch it as they extend in court. You watch that you got to keep your lawyers paid, and your money's going away and stuff. You're not making any more money. Colby was in there with some big fish in terms of, if he's going to fight for a payday. I think that is what may have prevailed here. Usually the richer guy wins in court when he's able to extend that stuff out and just wear the other party out. At least it's a known, corporate strategy type of move. You know what I mean? And Colby, I always thought, was the weak hand here.
Right, but when you're talking about the richer guy, are we talking about Masvidal, or is UFC kind of behind him?
Yeah, no, I think we're talking about all the parties involved, including maybe even the Nelk boys. I don't know. I'm not up on podcast ratings or anything like that. But if you're a YouTube personality, at some point you have funds to manage stupid stuff like fly to Miami and buy dinner for a couple of guys. Because at the end of the day, it's a couple $1,000 invested in the prank. They get a bunch of media out of it. It gets paid back in spades, right? So I think that's what went wrong there. But they are also a party that's probably guilty, to some extent there, that may have to make some recompense. The UFC supposedly has funded them and given them some money and things. So, that's where the ties begin. And who knows what they find there. But social, again, you need attorneys asking for phone records and then pouring over phone records and $500 an hour. How much of that can you do? Can Colby?
Yeah, I know we always felt that maybe Dana White was involved in some of these texts. I mean, has your opinion changed on that at all, or no?
you know, I feel like Dana thrives on not letting stuff go on beneath him that he doesn't know about. Like I think that's very much his style. He's completely hands-on, controls just about everything, especially from the beginning of the. Now he's got people assigned to certain things that he trusts and things, but so either he slipped here and he's still buddies with the Nelk boys enough to do their podcast and help them out and stuff, or there is something where it may that idea of creating a media storm and stuff. Who knows where it came from? It didn't even need to come from Dana. It may have, but I think for the type of problem that Colby was bringing them, it would only need to be one of the UFC execs, somebody else, somebody over there with some power who could, Dana said, all right, that Nelk boy relationship, that's on your table. You get some, figure out what you're doing with them, and hands it to somebody. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's a wide array there of chance that the UFC and their brass were at least aware and, possibly inspired the whole thing. It should have been innocent.
Let me ask you about this. Sorry, Leon Edwards says he won't fight Covington, even if they send him a contract. He's not signing it. How do you think that's going to work out?
Dana's done this sort of fight before. If he can, the UFC and certainly Leon Edwards in that weight division is not, in the top 5 or 8 or 10 champions that they've had yet. So he's not quite in a position where he's that huge marketable guy that they couldn't just jettison. If they just let go Ngannou, I think Ngannou moves the radar a little more than Edwards. So my hat's off to Leon for sticking his neck out and speaking his mind. If Leon's real sharp, these are 50, 60, 70 page contracts that these guys exchange. If somewhere in there, Leon somehow got them to put a clause, or there's a clause that can be interpreted that as a champion, he has a say in who his opponents are, then contractually what he's saying there is going to have some teeth. But if he says, I have a say, like he thinks like Dana's going to be like, well, Leon, what do you think? He's being a little silly. So I don't know what, I don't know if that was the most telling thing Leon said was, I do have a say in who I fight. It's like, okay, show me the contract and what line you're basing that statement on. And, we can move on from there with how much strength you have it. But if you're saying it from a position of I'm the champion, and look, Leon is also happens to be morally right. He shouldn't have to fight Covington. The fact is Leon sat on a long winning streak and waited for other guys to play out the championship title picture. Masvidal slipped in there. I know Masvidal, and maybe Leon had a case that he should have gotten a title fight, with Usman ahead of Masvidal, but they slipped Masvidal in there, because of moving the needle and stuff. Leon's been a very good soldier. He didn't do this. Isn't the commotion he made back then. He allowed all that to happen, played it out, wound up with the title in a situation against odds, including within the company. I don't think anybody expected or really wanted him to win. I don't think they wanted to move forward with him as a champion, even though with a British guy, you really can't go wrong. So they give him the immediate rematch, and he plays the rematch. He may have still been high from the win, which is understandable. But if he was just talking trash when he said that, I think that the UFC thrives on making people eat their words too. So he should be very careful with what happens.
Yeah, having said that, if he doesn't do it, do you think the UFC strips him?
Who would you put Leon in with next? Because here, I think I don't know. They could strip him. They could knock him down. That's why I think Leon's in a situation where he's expressed himself and everybody's paying attention now. If he continues to express himself that way, if the UFC does what they've done in the past, is they will crush him. That's usually what they do. From Jens Pulver and the Monty Cruz to Tito Ortiz to even Randy Couture spent time ostracized before coming back and things. There's no end. Ngannou is a nice recent example of someone they will let go because the company's always greater than any of the current champions or faces. Leon isn't even as big as any of those other guys. So he's expressed himself. Now how he continues to express himself will also answer that question, what they do next. I think that they could basically shelve him. They could let him keep the title, create an interim title, and then let the interim champion, fight his way into just either Leon comes back or his next fight is to legitimize the belt and Leon's gone. And, I think that's a script that's rather simple for the UFC to follow, and it's cookie cutter. They've probably done it before, in almost exactly that fashion. So, yeah, I think Leon's expendable still.
Now, I've heard some people say, well, one person I heard say they think that this is kind of where they're trying to set up maybe Covington versus McGregor if McGregor's able to beat Michael Chandler and Covington's able to beat Leon, which is a stylistic, I would say, advantage match for Covington, given his wrestling skill. Do you think there's some truth to that maybe they're trying to get McGregor versus Covington or McGregor versus Leon even?
I think that's the match that Leon wants. When he says, I don't have to fight Covington, I get to say, well, who do you want to fight, Leon? That'll be McGregor. He's a Brit. You do it in London. You might be able to do that at Wembley. And Leon would be the B side, but Leon would be fine with being the B side. And so I think Leon's being, that's the next level of his thinking there is he wants to be, Covington becomes, again, Leon's going to be the B side in terms of, even though he's a champion in either of those in terms of popularity or how they move the needle. So they're going to want Covington to win. Covington McGregor might be the big fight, and they'll do that probably in Vegas and the same old thing. Leon may actually have the key to something unique and different with him and McGregor in like an all, British Isles type of battle. And, I, as an observer too of the boxing scene and things, I think the British public, I know they're going through some, troubled times in the economy and stuff like that, but I think the British public will step up and support a fight of that magnitude too. McGregor and kind of with Ireland versus England, I think all that kind of could be evocative. And McGregor, unless I'm getting my history wrong, McGregor hasn't been asked to headline at home again, and that is an intriguing money-making opportunity. I think that they could look at as an alternative to always running in Vegas. So McGregor Edwards is an underestimated matchup, and I think that's what Edwards is saying. Hey, here. You'd have to put a lot behind it to get it to that level, and Edwards isn't, Tyson Fury or that level of guy there on the British end to fill up Wembley, but that's where you count on McGregor and his star power and stuff like that. For his return to the British Isles, I think it could be, within the scope of what could be done. And the UFC likes to do big things.
I also think that, Edwards wants to fight Masvidal if he can somehow get past Burns, which I'm not sure he can. But, with their history, the backstage altercation and all that, they have unfinished business that's personal.
Yeah, but, my matchmaker sense, kicks in there and stuff like that. Leon's not going to be champion forever, and that sounds like something you hold for post-championship run. Whether he loses to Covington, McGregor, or he beats both of those guys and starts a legacy, then you forget more and more about that Masvidal stuff anyway. I wouldn't, and I love George. I have nothing against George, but I wouldn't insert George into this title picture. I'm already sort of breaking my own rules in terms of like qualification for a title fight with McGregor in this mix. But granted, his star power and that's what he will want. He will want a title shot also, which makes it easier on the McGregor side to make it happen. I don't want a whole bunch of plugins into the title shot. There are guys that are coming up in that division. There are guys that didn't make it to title shots that at some point had solid winning streaks. Leon almost, it's a tough weight class, and a lot of people, in the top 10 are not going to make a title shot. And that's, and to insert other people in there is wrong. So, Leon and Masvidal can wait for a post Leon's title run.
Now, what do you think about them putting Bilal Muhammad in with Rachmanov now? Bilal's kind of on a winning streak. He's kind of said some negative things about this Covington situation. And now it looks like they want him to fight Rachmanov. What do you think about that?
You reap what you sow. He knows what he works for. Who the bosses are. And when people have done what he did, they get in trouble, kind of thing. One way or another. So maybe he knew what the repercussions were, or maybe he's regretting it now. But we'll see. He may qualify as one of those guys that never gets to, now you freeze up. You got Leon Edwards just coming off a win, right? So now you've got to have a few months, right? So you rush him back, say in 4 months, and say everything works out exactly like Leon does. Then they're going to need 6 or 8 months to build him up against Connor. More time goes by and things like that, and we'll see if then what happens there is then you need another 6 months for whoever the champion. If it's McGregor, it could be a year before you see him again. Bilal Muhammad could beat Rakhmonov and still never make the title picture. And see, that's what's wrong with these insertions. But Connor's gotten exceptions before, and I assume he'll get one again. I guess in this scenario, I'm giving him one. And it's, again, it's against my better judgment. For the pure matter of the sport, he should be somewhere in the middle of the pack with his current record and activity, right? So Masvidal doesn't get, he's not that big a star that he gets that by. McGregor only. We're operating in Dana's world.
Now that you mentioned this, because this is something I did want to ask you about, I've been thinking about. We've heard Dana talk a lot of stuff on boxing and how their model is and how their championship picture is. Is he in danger of making the UFC even worse? I mean, because now guys are fighting for really no reason other than if the pay-per-view will be popular. From a competitive standpoint, a lot of these matches have no competitive sense whatsoever. Is he in danger of, doing the same thing boxing did or maybe worse?
I think, it's two broken systems. At this point, neither system benefits the athlete in their own, bent way. In boxing, you have, 4 or 6 different world titles and world championships that are, sort of held in some balance as equal, and there's some credence in trying to get all of them. And, they have their bizarre structure that, sometimes leads to you not getting the fights you want, and the UFC has, their own structure that they think they give you the fights you want all the time. But if you're a true purist, like, I'm very over McGregor. Like when I wanted the first time Dustin Poirier fought him, I was like, all right, Dustin's going to put an end to this train. And when he fought Eddie Alvarez, I was like, okay, Eddie, hopefully he'll put an end to this train, because he was, and McGregor and Aldo, and McGregor stepped up at every single spot, so he made it inevitable. But at some point, the Diaz loss, I mean, that first Diaz loss is the first blemish. Then, he breaks his foot. At this point, there's a lot of bluster. And his best moments are clearly behind him. So we are recycling him, for the money. And at that point, you could put him in, you have your main and co-main events, and then have him as that third spot. They've done well with some, if I remember correctly, UFC 100, they put Henderson and Bisping in that number 3 spot as a match. That's that's the kind of match that in the 3 spot with McGregor against somebody where he belongs now. But his ego and everything doesn't allow that. Whatever the structure they have, they also keep draws away from each other so that they can maximize their money and things. So there's so much that goes on to keeping McGregor floating. Yeah, I would have spent that on Bilal Muhammad, Rakhmonov. There you've got, Bilal does a good job on social media rather, but you're not a McGregor. And the UFC says they look at that, and yeah.
But I mean, we got 4 pretty blockbuster matchups coming up in boxing. We got Garcia Davis, Haney Lomachenko, Fury Usyk. We got some big fights coming up. And the UFC's like trying to pull Colby Covington out of hiding, trying to recycle McGregor, as you mentioned. Is this a little bit of a danger area for the UFC because they're kind of making their title picture look even more unorganized than boxing has?
At the end of the day, those circle charts, there's a good piece of the pie that boxing and MMA share in terms of people watching, especially the big fights. And it's cyclical. Boxing that complaint is perennial in boxing. We didn't get the fights we wanted. Terrence Crawford, has he ever, stepped up to fight? What's the kid from Texas?
No,
I'm just gonna
Spence.
Yes, Errol Spence. Has that fight been made? I don't remember
No.
that one happening yet. So it's up and down. Dana is like I said, they have their own way of looking at social media, and they believe if they deliver McGregor versus Covington, that they've delivered the match that most people want. And again, I don't think that that's a quite a fair way to look at it, especially from the sport. Like I think if you're gonna do something with McGregor, go ahead and do it, and do something big that you can't do with anybody else. But if you're just gonna take him to Vegas again and put him in with Covington and make a lot of noise with two loudmouths, you've actually lost an opportunity. So it depends on what they want to do, because they if they don't dedicate themselves to a big match between McGregor and Leon Edwards in England, it's not going to happen. And again, if they were forward thinking and big thinking, I think that might be the biggest payoff of all the matches on the table for them. But they might say, "Oh, you can't do that." Okay.
Yeah, we also got Benavidez Plant. So I mean, boxing's having a stretch where they're going to have a lot of fights that fans have been asking for. So I think it's interesting that UFC is going this direction, given all the criticism that Dana has given boxing over the years. It seems like boxing's trying to get back more to, giving the fights that people want to see, at least for the time being, for the next few months. And UFC is getting further away from that.
I understand what you're saying. It's spin, because I think, whoever the boxing promoters are, at some point they figured out the way to make money, and this is the way to make money, the most money, and they made the deals. If they don't make the deals, it's because of money. So that's in tune for a little bit, and it'll fall apart again. I think that's the same thing. We predicted a little while. Ngannou's gone. Diaz is gone. McGregor's still here, but Jones is still here. But I felt about 2 years ago that we would see the UFC start to recycle the top shelf. Jones been around for 10 years, and he's still obviously, as a heavyweight, has some shelf life, and that's good. But the guys that they've been concentrating on for the paydays haven't really changed that much. McGregor's been around for a long time now. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they deliver in the next few years. They do need some stars.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to end on, because you are right. They are still kind of recycling guys that have been around for a decade or more, So it's going to be interesting to see how they get through that challenge.
Yeah, and again, we mentioned it on another podcast just really fast, but Ngannou goes off. Ngannou coming back to UFC is still one of the most lucrative things he'll be able to do after that one big payday. So that would be just another recycle, actually extending itself in time and stuff. So, yep, and the UFC has they'd rather recycle at some point. So there it is.
All right, Miguel. Well, I appreciate taking time out of your day to do another episode with me. And as always, people checking out the MMA Conspiracy Hour. Until next time, take care.